Listen close, because what you are about to hear is not some made-up internet drama. This is one of those stories that hits you right in the chest and makes you sit back and say, no way, this really happened. This is about a quiet widowed grandma who spent her whole life doing right by everyone, and how one cold, heartless HOA decided she was an easy target, and how that choice lit a fire that nobody in that neighborhood saw coming. It all started on a calm morning, the kind of morning where the air feels soft and the street is quiet and the world looks like it is finally taking a breath. Eleanor Harris woke up the same way she had for years, slowly, carefully, with aching knees and tired hands. She was in her late 70s, silver hair always pulled back, neat cardigan even in summer, because the house felt empty without her husband, who passed years ago. That house was not fancy, it was not new, but it was paid off and filled with memories. Every creaky floorboard, every faded photo, every scratch on the doorframe had a story behind it. This woman did not bother anyone. She waved at neighbors, baked cookies during the holidays, watered her little garden every morning, and went to bed early. She was the kind of person you forget is even there, because she never caused trouble, and that right there is exactly why they chose her. Because when you are quiet, when you are old, when you are alone, some people see weakness. That morning she shuffled to the door when she heard a sharp knock, not the friendly knock from a neighbor, not the soft tap from kids selling something, but a hard official knock, the kind that makes your stomach drop when you hear it. She opened the door, and standing there was a man in a pressed shirt holding a clipboard. His smile was tight, fake, like he had practiced it in the mirror. He said her name like he already owned it, like Eleanor Harris was just another line on his paper. He handed her an envelope and told her it was an HOA violation notice. Then he turned and walked away before she could even ask a question. She stood there holding the envelope like it was something dangerous, like it might bite her. She closed the door slowly and leaned against it because her legs suddenly felt weak. Listen, because this is where it really starts. She opened the envelope at her kitchen table, hands shaking, and the words jumped off the page: violation, unauthorized porch railing, non-compliant flower pots, fines, accumulating, daily threat of legal action.
We need to listen to each other.
She read it again and again, trying to understand how the porch railing her late husband built with his own hands decades ago was suddenly a problem, how the flower pots he helped her paint were now illegal. They wanted thousands from her, money she did not have. They gave her a deadline that felt impossible, and the tone of the letter was cold, like she was not a human being but a problem that needed to be fixed. She sat there for a long time staring at that paper, the house quiet except for the ticking clock, and for the first time in years she felt scared, not the normal kind of scared, but the deep, heavy kind that settles in your chest. She thought maybe this was a mistake, maybe if she called them it would get cleared up, so she picked up the phone, hands trembling, and dialed the number. The voice on the other end was flat, bored, almost annoyed. She explained softly that she was a widow on a fixed income, that the railing had been there for years, that no one had ever complained. The response was simple: rules are rules, pay the fine or face further action. No compassion, no flexibility, no humanity. She hung up the phone and stared at the wall, and in that moment something inside her cracked. This was not about a railing, this was about power. Days passed and more letters came, each one more aggressive than the last, each one threatening more fees, more penalties, more legal action. They knew she was alone, they knew she did not have a lawyer, they knew she would likely just fold and pay or lose everything. But here is the part nobody expected. Eleanor did not tell anyone at first. She carried that weight quietly, just like she carried everything else in her life, but pain has a way of showing itself.
You can't let her in.
And one afternoon her neighbor Jake noticed something was wrong. Jake was in his late 20s, a construction worker, always covered in dust, always helping people out, the kind of guy who fixes things without asking for anything back. He saw Eleanor sitting on her porch staring off into nothing, and he could tell something was off. He asked her if she was okay, and she tried to smile, but it broke halfway through and the truth spilled out. She showed him the letters, her hands shaking again, and as he read them his jaw tightened because he could not believe what he was seeing. This sweet old woman was being bullied. And Jake was not the kind of guy who stayed quiet when he saw something wrong. He told her she was not alone, even if it felt like it, and those words hit her harder than anything because she had felt alone for so long. That night Jake went home and he could not stop thinking about it, the unfairness, the cruelty, the way the system was leaning on someone who could barely stand anymore. So he did something small at first, something simple. He posted her story online. He did not exaggerate, he did not lie, he just told the truth: an elderly widow facing massive fines over a porch railing. And listen close, because this is where everything starts to turn. People saw it and they got angry. Comments poured in, messages of support, offers to help, people sharing the post again and again, because everyone knows someone like Eleanor. Everyone has a grandma, an aunt, a neighbor who deserves better. The story spread beyond the neighborhood, beyond the town, and suddenly the HOA was not dealing with one quiet widow anymore. They were dealing with the court of public opinion. But Eleanor did not know any of that yet. She was still sitting at her kitchen table reading another letter, heart pounding, wondering how her life had come to this, wondering if she was going to lose the home she built her life in. And just when it felt like things could not get any worse, another knock came at the door. This time it was not a clipboard. It was something much bigger. And what happened next is something nobody saw coming. Stay with me, because this is only the beginning. Stay with me, because what happens next is the part that makes grown people stop talking mid-sentence and wipe their eyes, because nobody expects kindness to roar as loud as it did that day. Nobody expects a quiet widowed grandma to become the center of a moment that shook an entire system. The knock on the door that afternoon did not sound angry, it did not sound official, it sounded unsure, hesitant, almost gentle. Eleanor slowly stood up, every movement careful, because fear still lived in her bones. She opened the door and froze. Standing there was not one person, but several faces. Some she recognized, some she did not. Jake was there, standing just a little forward like a shield. Beside him was a woman holding a folder, a man in a suit, another older couple, and behind them more neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. Eleanor felt embarrassed, at first confused. She asked if something was wrong, and Jake gently told her, "No ma'am, nothing is wrong, everything is finally right." The woman with the folder introduced herself as a local attorney. She said she had seen the story online. She said she specialized in HOA disputes, and she said something that made Eleanor grip the doorframe to stay standing. She said, "We are here to help you, and you will not pay a single dollar." For a moment Eleanor thought she misheard, because help like that does not usually show up at your front door, not when you are old, not when you are alone, not when the world feels like it has already moved on without you. But it was real. Neighbors stepped forward one by one, telling her how they were furious when they heard what the HOA was doing, how they remembered her husband fixing bikes for kids, how she brought soup when people were sick, how she always waved even when nobody waved back. Someone started crying, and then Eleanor did too, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that fell like rain she had been holding back for months. The attorney explained calmly that the HOA had overstepped their authority, that the violations were selectively enforced, that the fines were excessive and likely illegal, that Eleanor had strong legal ground and stronger community backing. She said something else that made the air feel electric. She said the HOA had no idea who they were messing with because they thought Eleanor was alone. But she was not. Word spread even faster after that. Local news picked up the story. Cameras showed up, microphones pointed toward Eleanor, who was terrified to speak at first, but when she did, her voice shook and cracked and somehow stayed strong. She said she just wanted to live peacefully in the home she shared with her husband. She said she never imagined rules could be used to hurt someone like this. She said she was grateful beyond words. People watching at home felt it in their chest, because this was not just about an HOA anymore. This was about dignity. The HOA board did not like the attention, not one bit. They sent a new letter, softer this time, suggesting mediation, suggesting compromise, but the lawyer told Eleanor this was not the time to bend, because bullies only apologize when they realize they might lose. And they were about to lose everything. The court date was set and the tension in the neighborhood was thick. People whispered about it at the grocery store, at church, at the gas station, because everyone wanted to know how this would end. The day of the hearing, Eleanor wore a simple blue dress and the necklace her husband gave her years ago. She walked into the courtroom with Jake by her side and rows of supporters behind her. The HOA representatives looked stiff, uncomfortable. They avoided eye contact. They were not prepared for this many eyes watching. The lawyer laid out everything calmly: the history of the railing, the lack of complaints, the selective enforcement, the aggressive fines, the emotional distress caused to an elderly widow. The judge listened closely, and when the HOA lawyer tried to argue that rules were rules, the judge stopped him and said something that made the room go silent. He said rules are not weapons, and they are not excuses to harass people who cannot fight back. The ruling was swift. The fines were dismissed. The HOA was ordered to pay legal fees, and they were warned against further harassment. Eleanor did not cry in that moment. She just closed her eyes and breathed like someone who had been underwater for too long and finally reached the surface. Outside the courthouse, people clapped, hugged her. Reporters asked how she felt, and she said something simple, something that stuck with everyone. She said, "I feel like my husband is proud of me." That sentence spread everywhere. The HOA board members resigned one by one over the following weeks. Policies were reviewed, new protections were put in place for elderly residents, and what started as cruelty ended as change. But the most powerful moment came later, quietly, not in front of cameras. Eleanor sat back on her porch one evening, the same porch they tried to take from her, flower pots back where they belonged, the railing still standing strong, and children from the neighborhood played nearby, laughing. Jake stopped by with lemonade, and they sat in the fading sunlight. Eleanor looked at him and said, "I thought the world forgot about people like me." And Jake said it didn't, it was just waiting for a reason to show up. That is the part that stays with you, because evil is loud, but kindness, when it finally speaks, can shake walls. This was never just a story about an HOA, it was about what happens when ordinary people decide that enough is enough, and when one widowed grandma reminds the world that dignity does not have an age limit. And if you are listening to this right now, remember this: if you ever think your voice is too small or your fight is too late, remember Eleanor, because sometimes the strongest stand comes after the quietest life. And that ending right there, that is the kind that makes you cry.